Which laptop should I buy? What is CPU speed? What is this SSD? And how does it compare with the HDD? Does RAM size really matter? Let's find out in this one single video. Yo, what's going on guys? Tanmay here for Simple Snippets, and today I'm gonna be answering one of the most important questions that you as a student usually gets, and I've been getting this question quite a lot of times from users, from subscribers that hey Tanmay, how do I select a laptop for me? Suggest me some good laptops and whatnot. So in this video, I'm gonna tell you what are the important things that you need to consider when you're buying a laptop, and what are some trivial factors which also matter, but we do not really look at them very seriously. So we are going to talk about some important things, some not so important things, but some things that you really need to take care of when you're buying a laptop. So this video is going to be one-stop solution for all your questions regarding laptops, or if you're buying a desktop or whatever system you're making. And we're going to talk about everything in detail. So make sure you watch this video till the end, because at the end of this video, you're going to get all your answers right in this video itself. Now, before we start off with the different things that you need to look at in a laptop when you're buying a laptop, let me put out this statement very clearly. If you're a student, be it computer science or IT or non-IT or any kind of student or any individual who's buying a laptop for some work, for some learning, which usually we actually are, then in this case, note this statement that buying a laptop should not be actually considered as an expense. It should be considered as an investment. Now, what does this really mean? So when you're purchasing something, and if you just look at it in the form of an expense, you try to save money, you try to, get the cheaper version or get an older version and whatnot. But if you're looking at it in the form of an investment, what it would mean is you're going to learn from that laptop, right? You're going to do some projects, you're going to do some presentations on that laptop, you're going to maybe perform some coding. If you're an IT student, you're going to develop some applications, and a lot of knowledge transfer is going to happen via that laptop. So do not consider that laptop as an expense and get the cheapest one and get the one that will just work for like a few months or maybe one year max. Try to optimize your budget. Try to add in a little bit of bucks just to get the best laptop for you guys. Okay, so just consider this. Just remember this statement. Buying a laptop should not be considered as an expense. It should be considered more like an investment, especially if you're a student. Okay, so now that this is in your mind, the second thing that you need to note that is when you're buying a laptop, you're not gonna replace it in just like under a year, right? When you're buying a laptop, you want to use that laptop for like at least 2 or 3 years, or at times even 5 years. So we are not like gonna replace it in just 1 year. So it's a long-term investment. So you want a laptop which will perform equally good, or at least at a certain level even after 2 or 3 years, right? So keep these 2 points in mind. And now that these 2 points are very clear, let's move ahead. So talking about laptops, there are 3 important components that you absolutely need to know in detail. And those 3 components are CPU, aka the processor. So that's the first. The second one is the RAM, that is the main memory. And then the third one is the SSD or HDD, which is the secondary memory. Okay, so these are 3 important components in a laptop or even in a desktop system that you guys need to understand. So let's talk about the first one, that is CPU. Now the CPU is actually the brain of the entire system. It's the processor. It is what executes your programs, executes the applications, and depending upon what CPU your laptop is, the overall performance of the laptop can be measured. So the performance of a CPU majorly depends upon the gigahertz, that is the speed. So the speed of a CPU is measured in gigahertz. You must have seen 2 gigahertz, 3 gigahertz, and so on and so forth. But not just that, there is another factor of a CPU, which is the number of cores it has. Okay, so more the number of cores, more the number of parallel processing, parallel or multitasking can the CPU do. Okay, so in layman terms, I'm trying to explain. I don't want to get into a lot of in-depth details because then that would be too nerdy, too geeky. But just understand that more the number of cores, that is 4 cores or 2 cores or 6 cores or 8 cores, more the number of parallel processes the CPU can perform. Similarly, higher the clock speed, that is higher the CPU speed, the faster is the processor. Okay. Now to give you some names, in CPU manufacturers we have 2 big players, which is Intel as well as the AMD processors. Okay, so Intel has their own processors for laptop as well as desktop, and AMD is another company which also has which are for laptops as well as desktops. Now, if you are a IT student, if you are a computer science student, try to aim for i3 of the Intel line, or somewhere higher than i3. Okay, so i3, we have i5, we have i7, we also have i9. But then as the CPU specs increase, the cost also dramatically increases. But try to have at least i3. Pentium dual core won't probably perform well 2 or 3 years down the line, right? So we are looking for a laptop which will work pretty good even after 2 or 3 years. Now, if you're a regular user, if you're a normal student, if you're a non-IT student basically, and your work is not going to be very heavy, and you're not going to make applications, you're just going to do some presentations, you're going to do some Excel and Word writing work, or some basic web surfing, you can go ahead with the basic processors like, Pentium dual core and whatnot. But this is for the Intel. For the AMD, we have new processors which are Ryzen processors, which are usually selected when it comes to gaming, or if you want to save some bucks, So an i3 in Intel will have a similar variant for AMD processor also, maybe Ryzen 3 or something like that. I don't really know the exact nomenclature. I will add some links in the video description for you to check out. But yeah, we have similar processors from both companies. You can go ahead with either of the two. I usually tend to prefer the Intel because I have used all the laptops which have Intel processors and they work pretty good. So there's that. And one last thing that you need to consider when you're buying a laptop, especially when it comes to the CPU, is the generation of that processor. So Intel right now, as of today, when this video is launched, Intel is, I guess, on its 9th generation of processors. So i3 has first generation, second generation, third generation, and as the generations increase, the processing speed increases, the heat management reduces, the heat dissipation reduces, and then there is faster clock speed, there is faster processing and whatnot, So try to have the latest generation processors. I guess the 8th generation is there available right now in India. I'm not sure about the 9th generation. Some of the 9th generation are already there. So there's that. So summing up the CPU component, we have CPU speed, which is measured in gigahertz. Higher the better. Then we have the number of cores of a CPU. Again, higher the better. And lastly, we have the generation of CPU. Now, similar to Intel, we also have generations in AMD. So you can go ahead and research on that. So this was the very first important component, that is CPU, and some important aspects about that CPU. Okay. So keep all these aspects in mind. You can make a note of them and make a choice according to that. Select a laptop which has a good CPU, because CPU is the brain of the laptop. So moving on, the second most important part is the RAM. That is the main memory. So whenever you open any application, be it a Google Chrome tab, be it an Excel sheet, be it a Word file or any other program, it is going to be residing in the main memory, aka RAM. RAM stands for random access memory. So whatever programs that you're running are first brought into the RAM. So by default, the size of the RAM decides how many applications you can run. So higher the RAM size, more the number of applications can be run simultaneously. Okay, so this is very basic. Apart from that, there is one more thing about RAM that you need to consider, which is the type of RAM. So we have different variants of RAM as well, So we have DDR3, DDR4, GDDR3, and typically the higher the number, the better the quality of the RAM. So a DDR4 RAM is faster and better compared to DDR3. And again, I'm going to drop some links in the video description for you guys to research, because if we just keep talking about RAMs, it can be a separate video. But this is one thing to consider. So when you're talking about RAM, the size matters. Size does matter, because as the size of the RAM increases, you can run multiple applications. Now, this does not affect someone who's not going to load a lot of applications simultaneously. So if you have like 10 applications running simultaneously, you might need a larger RAM. But if you're going to work on only 1 or 2 applications, and if you're a non-IT student who does not run heavy applications, then 4 GB RAM would be enough for you in today's time. However, I do not recommend that for IT students, for computer science students, especially if you are doing some app or game development. At least try to target for 8 GB RAM. So that's about the size. Now, as I mentioned, there is another category, that is the type of RAM. Try to have the better type of RAM, which is DDR4, which is currently the market standard. So try to aim for that. DDR3 RAM would be good enough. It's not like it won't work. The size also matters. And the last category or subcategory in the RAM department is the speed of the RAM. Now, depending upon the type of the RAM and the CPU that supports different speeds of RAM, a RAM stick has multiple or different speeds. Now it runs on 1800 MHz. So megahertz is the speed calculation of a RAM. So we have 1800 MHz, which is base. Then we have 2000. Then we have 2133. I'll put some numbers over here. Higher the number, the better the speed of the RAM. Okay. So do note that when you're buying a laptop, and if you have multiple laptops in comparison, see the RAM speed and see the RAM type also, not just the size. Okay. And by the way, size does matter when you're running a lot of applications, especially heavy applications. So I would always recommend higher the better. 8 GB should be probably standard nowadays. Come on guys, our cell phones have like 12 GB RAM nowadays. So try to target 8 GB RAM as the base memory. And if you're buying a laptop which has 4 GB RAM, you can always upgrade in future. So typically whatever the standard RAM size there is in a laptop, you can always double that size. So if a laptop is coming with 4 GB by default, you can expand it to 8 GB. If a laptop is coming in with 8 GB by default, you can expand it to 16 GB. Now this might not be the case in every laptop, so you guys need to figure it out. You guys need to like find out the model number and maybe even call the customer care of that company to check out whether the RAM can be expanded or not. Or you know, on most online stores like Amazon and Flipkart, there is some information given whether the RAM can be expanded or not. So go do that research as well. So yeah, this was the second component, RAM. 3 things to consider when it comes to RAM: the size, the type of the RAM, and the speed of the RAM. Okay, keep this in mind. And now coming to the last most important component when it comes to buying a laptop, which is the secondary storage. And this is probably the most underrated one, which is which type of secondary storage should you buy. Now in general, in the most layman or most basic sense, we have 2 different options when it comes to secondary storage. So what is the secondary storage? So secondary storage is where all your files are stored. You know, secondary storage is where all your media files are, all your Excel sheets, all your documentations, all your presentation, all the source code, even the applications, the exe files, everything is stored on secondary storage. When you're running an application, only that time that application is brought into the RAM, because that is the main memory, because that RAM is very high speed, much more faster than the secondary storage. However, secondary storage is cheaper and a lot more in size, so that's why it can store multiple media files, multiple applications, multiple images and videos and whatnot. So there's that. So why is this the most underrated? That's because the first 2 components, that is the CPU and the RAM, usually run at a very high speed when it comes to input output and when it comes to read and write of instructions compared to the secondary storage. So in secondary storage we have 2 conventional options, 2 standard options, that is the HDD, which is hard disk drive, and we have SSD, which is solid state drive. So let's talk about what is HDD. Now HDD is the most conventional secondary storage, which has that disk and the rotator, and the speed is measured in RPM, which typically is 5400 for the most standard HDD, and we do have an advanced HDD which is 7200 RPM. Okay. Now when it comes to solid state drive, an SSD, that is solid state drive, is a completely different component or a completely different type of memory. Okay, so the semiconductors and the actual material used to create the SSD is much more different than a HDD, and that's the real difference between the two, because an SSD is around 8 to 10 times faster when it comes to read and write of files and data transfer compared to the HDD, and that is a huge difference, guys. So please take this third component very seriously, that when you're buying a laptop, try to see if you can get a SSD instead of HDD or a combination of both. Now the major drawback here is an SSD is very expensive compared to HDD. Okay, so a HDD might cost you 3000 rupees for 1 TB, that is 1000 GB, and at the same time an SSD for the same rate of 3000 rupees will give you only 256 GB, which is 1/4 of the size that the HDD is providing. So you can see that there is a huge difference. However, as I mentioned, the speed difference is dramatic, and trust me guys, I have upgraded my laptop to a SSD and my life has never been so much easier. So yeah, SSD really matters a lot. In fact, from all these 3 important components, the SSD, that is the secondary storage, is the most underrated one, and we don't really look at it very seriously. We say that we have a very high profile CPU, a very high end CPU, and we have larger RAM and we are good to go. But that's not really the case. If you have a SSD, a laptop having a low end CPU and a little less RAM along with the SSD is much more better compared to a laptop which has a high-end RAM and CPU but a general HDD. Okay, trust me, the speed difference is a lot. Now talking about the different types, we have multiple types in HDDs and SSDs. I'm not gonna get into a detail. I'll drop some link in the video description to explain the different types. If in case you cannot buy a laptop with a SSD because, as I mentioned, the cost increases dramatically, at least try to buy a laptop which has a HDD of speed 7200 RPM. Okay, that's much better than having a HDD of 5400 RPM. So higher the number, higher the speed. Okay. And one smart thing that you can do is you can go with a hybrid combination. Some laptops come with a SSD plus HDD solution, which means that we have a 128 GB or 256 GB SSD, which can be your main C drive where all your programs are stored and your operating system is stored so that it boots 10 times faster. And then we have 1 TB of HDD, which is your general hard disk. Okay, so all your other media files can go over there. And this combination serves a little less cheaper than complete SSD solution. And this is the best one for you guys. So try to find out whether you can get a SSD in your budget. And as I mentioned, please extend your budget a little bit if you can. If you can't, obviously go ahead with the HDD with the better speed. But if you can extend it a little bit, definitely do not hesitate. SSD will change your life. Okay, enough of me talking about SSDs. I know I took a lot of time explaining, but I can't really explain you how amazing it is. So yeah, these were the three very, very important components when it comes to buying a laptop. And I hope you got a basic idea about the CPU, the RAM and the secondary storage, which is HDD or SSD. So these were the three important ones. So what are the some lesser important, but still we need to consider them kind of points. So let's talk about that. So the first point under the lesser important things to consider when you're buying a laptop is the screen resolution. So some standard screen resolutions are HD, then we have Full HD, and then we have 4K and 8K and so on and so forth. We are not going to talk about the high-end ones. The main comparison over here for buying a budget laptop, for a student laptop especially, is the difference between a HD laptop, a HD screen laptop and a Full HD screen laptop. So when you're talking about an HD screen, it is 1280 by 720p or 1366 by something number. I'll put it up on the screen. And you can see a frame also around it. So that's the resolution, that's the size of the screen. My laptop that I purchased like 3 years back is a HD laptop. It is not a Full HD laptop. And that's the real reason why I have to hook up that laptop to my desktop. And this monitor is actually a 1080p monitor. So now I can record 1080p videos on the desktop itself. And if you're an old follower, if you're an old subscriber, initially if you've seen my videos, the tutorial videos, the max resolution was 720p because my laptop's resolution was 720p. But now if you see the tutorials, we have Full HD available because I record the desktop and not the laptop. Okay, so that's the difference. Full HD is 1920 by 1080, which is a larger screen. But it is not really very important for a student perspective. It's only important when you're going to do some design work, when you're doing some color correction or color editing or Photoshop or photo editing basically. That's where the resolution matters. Otherwise, a 720p laptop can be usable. I would highly recommend to go ahead with Full HD, but the cost slightly increases when you go ahead to Full HD. Nowadays, Full HD laptops are pretty cheap, so you can go ahead with that. So there's that, and 4K is out of question because 4K laptops are very expensive, so you don't need to get into that. There is a resolution which is Quad HD in between, but again, those laptops are very expensive. So that's one thing that you need to consider. The second thing under the lesser important factors when buying a laptop is the battery life. Now, if you're a student and if you're going to carry your laptop to college and to home and you're going to travel, you need some good quality battery life. So that might be an important thing. If you're buying the laptop online, try to see the comments and see what the comments are related to battery life. Is the battery life at least 4 hours or higher? 4 hours or higher is what a basic budget laptop would give you. You cannot expect 10 hours and 12 hours of battery life from a budget laptop. But 4 hours is good enough. You're anyways going to be probably carrying your chargers along with you to the college if you're taking it to the college or work. So there's that. So that's why it's not really that important when it comes to the budget category. So the third thing to consider is the GPU. Now I did not include the GPU in the important category, the 3 important aspects, because GPU is required only when you're doing some graphics oriented work. Okay, so if you're working on some 3D designing work, if you're actually a gamer, so I'm not considering the gamer category altogether, right? So if you're doing some graphic work, if you're doing some 3D work, if you're doing some video rendering, that's when you require a dedicated GPU. So what is a GPU? So just like the CPU, which is the central processing unit, which is the brain of the entire laptop, we have a GPU, which is graphical processing unit, which only deals with processing of 3D work or graphic works. When there is a lot of color correction, when there is a lot of video editing, video rendering, or gaming which requires high-end graphics, that's where the GPU comes into picture and it reduces the load on the CPU. Okay, so having a dedicated graphics processor in that scenario is important. So if you're a student who works on 3D projects, who works on applications like 3D Maya and all those applications, right? If you're doing a lot of video editing, then by default you probably also need a 1080p screen, right? So in that case, see a laptop which has a dedicated GPU. Now, having said that, not that in general laptops do not have a GPU. In general, Intel provides its graphic GPU by default, so that's a standard solution. It's not as good as a dedicated GPU by Nvidia or AMD, but as I mentioned, you will only require a GPU if you're doing some graphic work. Now, I get this question a lot that if you're an IT student, if you're a computer science student, is a dedicated GPU required? The answer is no. In most cases, the programming that you're going to do is not going to require 3D rendering or is not going to be a game development. Unless it's a game development programming, you're not going to really require a GPU. Okay, so please keep this myth out of the way, and you don't really need to have a laptop with a dedicated GPU. Having a laptop with a dedicated GPU will only increase the cost. Okay, but if you are probably planning to get into some 3D work in future or 3 years down the line, and obviously you're going to use the same laptop, then it's better to have a dedicated GPU. Okay, so hence I considered GPU in the trivial category, in the lesser important category. But depending upon what type of user you are, you might require a dedicated GPU. So the next thing is not exactly a physical component. So far everything was pretty much physical components in a laptop. The next thing is, does your laptop have MS Office, or Windows? So what is the operating system of the laptop? So by default, most laptops come with Windows pre-installed, which is the original copy. Please don't try to get pirated copy in today's time. I guess original copy laptop would probably cost you 2,000 or 3,000 extra, but that's worth the money. Instead of buying a separate OS separately, that would be very costly. Try to buy a laptop which comes with Windows at least installed predefined. And the next software that most students require or might require is MS Office if you're on Windows system. If you're on Mac, I don't think you would require MS Office, right? But then if you're on Windows system, you might require MS Office. The reason why I'm saying you might is because nowadays you don't really need all those MS Office like Excel, PowerPoint and Word, because we have all these applications online provided by Google Docs, or in fact there might be some third party online solution as well. You just require internet connection and you can do all these editing work, Excel work, you can do Word, you can do presentations using Google Slides. So all these things and all these services are available online. So they are not really a huge deal breaker, but if you really want them, you need to consider and you need to see whether the laptop comes with pre-installed Windows, MS Office and Windows operating system. Okay, so there's that. And the last thing that you need to consider is not exactly not important, actually it is important, which is the warranty. Now there are types of warranties, that is the global warranty or domestic warranty, and that is usually given in the description itself. If you're buying a laptop online, you'll see whether it is a international warranty or a domestic warranty. The difference being that if you buy a laptop in US, United States, and if you come to India and your laptop is broken or there is some issue, and if you have an international warranty, you can go in any authorized service center and get your laptop repaired. But if you have a domestic warranty, then you have to get it repaired from where you bought it, from which country that you bought. Okay, so that's the basic difference. And typically the warranty is 1 year, and you also get extended warranty if you register on the appropriate website. So if you have Asus or HP or Dell laptop, typically when you sign up or register and if you pay a little bit of amount, you might get extended warranty. I would highly recommend that you go ahead and get the extended warranty, because as I mentioned, you're going to use the laptop for at least 2 years, right? Or maybe even more than 2. I'm using my laptop for like 3 years now. It's way past 3 actually. It's around 4 years now, and it's working pretty amazing. So get that extended warranty. It won't cost you a lot, maybe 1,000 rupees extra. And if it's an on-site warranty, the technician will come to your home depending upon your location, if it's feasible. Obviously, if you're living in a remote area, it might not be possible, but on-site warranty means that the technician, the serviceman will come to your home to do the repair work. If it's the general warranty, you have to take that laptop to the service center. So yeah, these were the trivial things or trivial aspects. They're still important, and that's why I mentioned them, and you need to know them as well, along with the 3 important ones that I mentioned. And this pretty much sums up the entire laptop buying guide. I hope you've got a little bit of idea about how to go about buying a laptop, and now that you know all these different things, you can select the laptop which suits you the best. So let me know in the comments which type of laptop do you want, what type of specifications are you looking for. And having said that, let me put out the laptop specs that I have. So I have a HP 522TX which I initially bought, which had 8GB RAM and 1TB hard disk. But then I later on upgraded this device, added 4GB extra. So now I have 12GB RAM, and then I also added 256GB SSD, which is Samsung Evo SSD. So you can, add extra SSD in your disk drive, optical disk drive component. So that's a hack. If you want, I'll drop some links in the video description how to do that. If you have an existing laptop which is very slow, try upgrading to a SSD, and trust me, that will make a lot of difference. I and one of my friend also did it, and we are extremely happy with the results. So yeah, this pretty much sums up the entire laptop buying guide video, and I hope you've got a lot of information from this video. If you've made it so far, and if you really found this helpful, please hit the like button. Please let me know in the comments what type of laptop are you looking for. And lastly, I want to say that I have added a link of Amazon link, which is an affiliate link to the entire shopping cart of Simple Snippets, where I have dropped some budget laptops as well as some laptops which are bang for your buck, and some gaming laptops as well. So those are affiliate links, and if you buy the laptops from those links that I have provided, those are affiliate links, which means that if you buy a laptop from those links, I would be getting some small commission from your purchase. Basically, if you do a complete purchase, obviously it will not go from your pocket. Amazon will be paying it to me, and that would be a huge help. So if you're planning to buy a laptop, and if you like one of the laptops that I've shared in the video description, definitely buy them from those links. That would be really helpful. It will help this channel as well. And yeah, that's it for this video, guys. I hope you like this video. If you want such more tech educational videos, let me know in the comment section. Do share it with your friends. If any of your friend is actually planning to buy a laptop, this video will definitely help him or her. So do share it with your friends as well. So thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Peace.